Ajay, thanks for joining IIMBue, as we call it. And it's a real privilege to talk to you. Now, just in preparation to this conversation, I thought I'll just brush up on English, and I just Googled the word imbue. And what came up was really interesting. Fill somebody or something with deep feelings, opinions, or ideas, or a particular sense of value or quality. So I have this big challenge and privilege today of actually using this conversation to actually achieve that objective true to the name of Imbue with the theme, which is emerging futures, which is a chosen theme for for this year. So thank you once again, and looking forward to this conversation.
Me too. Thank you, Ravi. Thank you for having me, and thank you for spending the time with me.
So Ajay, we will as the cliche, we'll start with the big from at the beginning. So would love to actually go back and to your journey from Nestle to Pepsi, to Citi, to Mastercard, and now General Atlantic. But I had two specific questions given the theme. It'll be good for us, to look back into the rear view and kind of pick what it meant for you as a personal journey, and what stood out when you look back in that 35-40 year window as key moments, that are worth kind of, that particular sense of value or quality that we can share with the audience for us today.
So I think it's 41 years now, Ravi. So it's kind of, I'm getting up there. I graduated from IIM Ahmedabad in 1981, and it flew by, right? And those days, you went and did your MBA straight after your undergrad. So there was no habit of going to work for a few years and then coming to do an MBA. And I think why I raised that is, I think the learning that you get from a master's degree, of having worked a little bit and then come to do a master's, I didn't have the privilege of that. Some of my batchmates did. But I found that difference as soon as I went to work, my first job, and that stayed with me, that I realized that I could learn a lot from everybody who was already there, irrespective of their background. So I joined Nestle, and what was then called Food Specialities at that time. And essentially ended up learning a lot from people who were salespeople, who had spent their life as salesmen and had started their career literally, trumping the streets in different villages and towns and states in India, trying to sell 3 pieces of coffee and 3 pieces of condensed milk and 3 pieces of a baby food, shop by shop by shop by shop. And the learnings from them were to me as valuable as the learnings from those of my colleagues who were MBAs and managing directors and product managers. And so I think the idea of learning from everybody all my life has been a big value add for me. So the curiosity that allows you to always feel I can learn from Ravi and Ajay and from others like us is really important. That's one. The second one, I think, is the good fortune I've had of working in many different places. So even while I was in India, I moved a number of cities, and I worked, as I said, in sales, I worked in marketing, I've worked in a factory, I've worked in opening restaurants, I've worked in Chennai, I worked in Delhi and Bombay and Calcutta and Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra. I traveled all over Karnataka and Andhra and Tamil Nadu. That diversity and richness of life's experiences, from the languages to the food to the people to the challenges of coming out of a sheltered childhood into really being thrown off the deep end to manage on 30 rupees a day as a sales rep in Madhya Pradesh. 30 rupees then was a lot of money, but not that much money. That I hold that very dear. I was lucky I had all those. I was fortunate to move overseas. I've lived in many countries overseas and traveled in many. When I look back 41 years, that richness, that quilt of many different fabrics is very much a part of my value. And I think the third part I would talk about is the learning that dealing with governments, dealing with opinion leaders, dealing with regulators, dealing with people who make policy, understanding why they care, and making sure that the work you do, the company you work in, fits into the needs of that country, fits into the needs of that marketplace, fit into the needs of that city, that we solve something, that we aren't just there to make money, but we're doing things. You and I would say doing well by doing good, or doing well and doing good, whichever words you prefer. I think that to me has been one of life's best experiences. Finding a way to make my company relevant, finding a way to make my business relevant, finding a way to make my role relevant to society locally. And I think when you put those three things together, learning from everybody, having the curiosity, kind of enjoying the journey and enjoying the opportunities and the experiences you get, not just the end, but the journey. And also third, this thing of doing well by doing good, or doing well and doing good. These days, people have fancy names like stakeholder capitalism and all that stuff you hear. That is just, I think, a real part of looking back.
That's fascinating, Ajay. And so I'll, during over this conversation, I'll pick up on each one of those. But to start with the first one, learning. I mean, you are hungry for learning very early. How do you keep that appetite for learning as you grow within the organization? How do you keep that curiosity alive? And are there any tips and tricks that you can share? How do you keep that hunger alive?
Well, the first thing is, this well. You're an entrepreneur, right? You're creating your own firm, and you seem to be doing it with success. At the end of the day, I will bet that right now you feel that you aren't doing enough. Right now you feel that somebody else is doing it smarter than you. Right now you feel that you made about 20 mistakes yesterday. Right now you feel that somebody working for you is being a complete idiot. Right now you feel that somebody working for you is smarter than you. Right now, this moment.
Agree, right? Completely.
Therefore, if you as an entrepreneur, as a successful entrepreneur can feel that way, why should not everybody? And the first thing of life is to think about a concept called competitive paranoia. I think competitive paranoia is a very constructive emotion, because what it does is it makes you always feel you're missing out on doing something better. It makes you feel like you should keep a wide scan on what's going on around you. And I don't mean this in a negative way, I mean it in a constructive way. That having a sense of constructive, competitive paranoia, to me, is the best attribute you can have, both as a leader, but also as a manager or as a person doing your own business. It just is. It's a great way to keep you curious. And I used to tell people who worked for me over the years that I assign a great deal of weight to three behaviors, which you can call culture, you can call it whatever you want. But the first one is the concept of sort of acting with a sense of urgency. And what I mean by that is not that you just make a decision based on some gut feel. In fact, you must listen carefully. God gave you 2 ears, 2 eyes, and 1 mouth for a reason. So you listen more, and you see more, and you speak less, right? So that concept of listening, but then having the ability to move quickly to a conclusion. That's important, because in our lives, particularly in your age group, technology is changing at such a rapid pace. Everything that you do, that to procrastinate is your worst enemy. And you must be able to make a decision with a sense of urgency, but with listening. So think of this as urgency with patience. The patience to listen, but the urgency to make a decision. That's the first act. The second one is similar. It's a contrast of risk-taking, but doing it thoughtfully. What do I mean by that? There is no reward if you don't take a risk. That's what arbitrage is, right? And in life, if you don't cross the road, you won't get to the other side. So you have to take a risk to get a reward. And the idea of taking that risk in a way that is informed by research, by knowledge, by a hunger to take the opinion of others into account, but then making your own call. That thoughtful risk-taking, the ability to raise your hand when you don't know enough and say, Ravi, I know you want me to take a decision on this, but I just don't understand enough about it. And I need your help. I need the help of a few others. That's what I call thoughtful risk-taking. So again, a contrast of, the plus and the minus, right? Like urgency and patience. This is thoughtfulness while taking a risk. And the last one is this idea of empowering the person who's closest to the customer, but then holding them accountable. Because it's not that they can just go ahead and do whatever they want. They are your ambassador. They are your cutting edge of your arrow, right? They're the tip of the arrow. But they need to be empowered to behave like an arrow. They need to be empowered to behave like your ambassador, but then they must be accountable and learn from things they do wrong. And all that wrapped up with a sense of competitive paranoia that makes you, you can't see this, but on my table side here is a thing I've had for many years, a saying, and it says, question everything, always, always, right? And the second one is done is better than perfect. So you see how they connect. To question everything always is competitive paranoia. Done is better than perfect is the sense of urgency, and thoughtful risk taking, because there's no perfection. If there was perfection, there'd be no arbitrage. So I think you have to get those right. And the third one is fail harder.
Fail harder.
Okay. So those are my three. And they connect to these cultures, these values, this way of thinking. And you cannot do all this, Ravi, without having around you people who are not with your background, who didn't all go to IIM Bangalore, or didn't go to the same school as you, or you haven't grown up with them as your childhood friends, or they are not people you go to party with. You have to surround yourself with people of different backgrounds, different experiences, different education. When you do that, you make yourself stronger. Because you're never going to be the smartest guy in the room. You need smarter guys than you around you. Then you will be the guy who will benefit, right? Because you're the starter of this company. All the benefit comes to you, but only if you know that you're not the smartest guy in the room. And so surrounding yourself with people who are different from you, that is the real meaning of diversity. People take diversity to mean I should have the right number of women, the right number of people of this color, of that ethnicity, of that sexual orientation. Yes, that is correct. But that's the result, not how you get there. How you get there is by surrounding yourself with people who don't look like you, walk like you, and talk like you.
In your own journey, how would you kind of describe that leadership style for yourself? And are there any specific views, essential ingredients that actually get those people, that you surround yourself with the people who will help your progress in some sense of yourself and the business?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think what we just talked about, those three attributes, which I said, you could call it culture, you could call it anything. They're actually leadership attributes. You know what I mean? If you're a good boss, you have to be willing to listen, but make a decision. Take a risk, but do it thoughtfully. Empower the people who work for you, but then hold them accountable. Do it all with a sense of competitive paranoia, and surround yourself with people who are not like you. Those are very strong leadership values and leadership attributes. I think the one thing missing in that is a really important thing is it starts from my personal belief. And I don't claim to be right on this, but my belief is that it's all about the people. That good leaders spend all their time thinking about the people they have and how to make them successful. Because if you do that well, then they multiply your effort in a geometric progression way. Because you cannot be thinking of everything and you cannot be managing everything. You're relying on people, right? As I said, right now somebody is doing something that will probably not be right, but other people are helping find that and fix it for you. You're not everywhere. You're not omnipresent. So the idea of it being about people and about making, people, culture trumps strategy every day. And so to me, how do you make people feel like they should work for Ravi? In addition to those three behavioral traits, I think the most important thing is something that I have been calling DQ. And if you Google me, like you were Googling the English language on IIMBue, Google DQ and me, and it'll come to you. It's what is DQ? When I was younger, it used to be that if you were smart and you had a great IQ, you were like God's answer to the future of mankind. you would do really well. And then somewhere, in my mid-30s, it became, hey, EQ, which was, well, you can't always choose your colleagues, you can't choose your boss, life will deal you tough days and good days. And the ability for you to navigate your boat through choppy waters, good days and bad days, by keeping your balance as a person, was your EQ. And I say there's a third attribute called DQ, which is your decency quotient. And what I mean by decency quotient is, decency is a very big word, but decency is a very simple word, because decency and good go together. You cannot be decent and bad. Just as you don't drink champagne when you're sad. Champagne and happiness go together. Whiskey you can drink when you're sad or happy. But champagne equals happy. Bubbles equals happy. There are some words that connote things. Decency connotes goodness. My idea of using decency quotient is to say that as a leader, your job is to make people come to work saying, I know Ravi's hand is on my back. I know Ravi is creating a level playing field so that I, Ajay, can start at the same starting line as the others and have a chance to win. I don't want Ravi to make me win. I just want him to give me a fair chance. I want him to give me fair feedback. I don't want him to be kind. I don't want him to say only nice things to me. I need to be told what I can do better. But then teach me and don't hold it against me. You see what I mean? That feeling of feeling safe, of feeling that I will always have your hand on my back, that you only want me to succeed, not to fail, but that you will tell me when I'm not doing things well. That's what I call DQ. In my first few years as CEO, a institution in Russia, a bank, which turned out to be a fraudulent set of house of cards. These guys basically changed the amount that you could withdraw on a debit card by collusion between management and risk people, and changed it from $3,000 to $30,000. And over the weekend, people took their debit cards issued on that bank and went and bought and paid deposits for cars and Mercedes Benzes and jewelry and all that stuff when they didn't have the money in their account. On Monday morning, when we woke up, Mastercard was on the hook for $12 million. And at that time, that was a lot of money for Mastercard. We were a much smaller company. Remember, the company grew from a 20 billion market cap to 360 billion in my 12 years, right? And that was built off revenue and profit. So we were a much smaller company. I had just finished telling my board that I would make X amount of money, so we would pay the following kind of bonuses. I had to go back 5 days later and tell the board that I had this problem of fraud. I offered to reduce my own bonus and not the bonus of my people. My general counsel and people at that time advised me to fire the Russian country manager. And I told them, explain to me what the country manager could have done over the weekend. What systems and MIS did you give this person to be smarter? And they couldn't tell me. So I told them, in fact, and the guy was working his butt off all weekend. I said, I'm going to cut your bonus by a certain amount, and I'm going to give all that money to him. Because he didn't do anything wrong. But you guys just tried to make me do something wrong by firing the innocent, by saving the people who work for you. And that's a lesson for you. And I then stood up in a town hall meeting and told everybody the story. And so, to give you an example of decency quotient, I was not being kind to the people who tried to tell me to fire this guy. That's not what I was doing. I was being hard, but I was being fair. And I was able to explain my fairness and my decision with complete transparency. And I took the approval of all people involved before speaking about it publicly, so they wouldn't feel bad. But I told them it's the only way we will teach the company that doing the right thing matters more than just doing something. And I'll give you an example of one that happened very early again. I was traveling to Russia, same trip, one trip. These days nobody's traveling to Russia, but that's for a different reason, right? And I went there And we had about 60 or 70 employees at Mastercard that time in Russia. That's all we had. It was a small office. Now till recently, it was a much bigger office, till this whole situation of the war in Ukraine. But after I finished my town hall, and I was very new in the company, I was telling them my vision of the future and all that good stuff, right? And this young man standing at the back on the left, I still remember his face, raised his hand right at the back of the conference room and said, I have a question. I said, sure, go ahead. And he said, you sound like a very smart guy and you have a great reputation when you were at Citi. People all talk about you even now. But you know, this company you have come to, it's a useless company. And all the stuff that you're saying, it cannot get fixed. So I said, come on, how can that be? What's wrong? What's the issue? He said, well, I have a person working for me who's at level 7. 7 is a much lower grade. Mastercard had numeric grades. 9 was the lowest. 7 was kind of, at the bottom. I wanted to promote that person from level 7 to level 6 because the job has expanded and grown. And I asked for approval from my manager, who approved it. And then it went to HR. And it's now been 6 months and I haven't heard back. And the person I wanted to promote has now quit and gone. And is a star. And we've lost a star. And I'm extremely frustrated. And so I just think this company is like this. Nobody takes a decision. There's bureaucracy, all the stuff, right? So I, of course, I didn't know what the hell he was talking about, right? So I said, well, look, I don't know. I'll find out. So that's the first thing. You don't have to know everything. You can say, I don't know, but I will find out. And I did. I came back to New York. I went to the HR people and I said, where is this document? Nobody could find it. So I said, find it for me. Go find out. Turned out it was at the regional office in Europe. It had not it went from the country in Russia to the regional office where nobody wanted to approve it for various reasons. They had their own good reasons. But when they didn't want to approve it, instead of saying no, they just sat on it. And when people asked, where is it? They pointed to New York and said, it's gone to the corporate office for approval. Now, there's so many things wrong with that. So many, right? So what I did was I put out a policy in the company with the approval of my board that going forward, when you, the subordinate, ask your boss for an approval, if in 5 days your boss does not revert, it's approved. So I changed the onus from the person asking for approval to the person granting the approval. You as the boss, Ravi, my boss, you were entitled to say no. You were entitled to say, I don't know, hold on, let me find out. Or you're entitled to say yes. You can't just sit on it, right? So that changed everything. When I look back on time, and I think about what were the seminal things that by accident I did, what I'm trying to tell you is actions speak louder than words. There were no words there. I was speechless when the guy told me that you've joined a lousy company and you can't fix it. And, so I was speechless.
And there was another phrase that you kind of spoke about in your previous conversations, and this is profit and purpose and marrying the two. So just taking that notion from doing the right thing from within the organization with the decency quotient and so on to actually the broader set of stakeholders for a business. If you can give us a couple of anecdotes around that and the decisions that you took, that will be great.
You cannot only do good because you won't make enough money to be able to self-propagate this virtuous cycle. So let me give you an example. In Mastercard, what business were we in? Payments. And I said, actually, we're in the business of fighting cash because cash is a problem. Because cash is what allows people to avoid taxes. Cash is what allows for crime, money laundering and crime, drugs, prostitution, gangs, mafia. Cash is what allows for people to feel if they're left out of the society and they're in a cash economy, they cannot build a credit history, they cannot get credit, they cannot get insurance. 42% of all the benefits that governments try to give their citizens don't reach them. they get taken up in what is called leakage. Leakage is theft. It's not leakage, it is theft. People have sticky fingers in this system. So everybody borrows money here. That's the issue. And so the challenge is, how do you remove that? And I said, we can do it. Our technology can go straight to Ravi and enable the government to deliver the benefit on Ravi's phone or on a card or in an account in the cloud where Ravi's eyes can access it or his fingerprint can, right? So this is not a traditional way of thinking. But Mastercard made a commitment in 2014 to reach 500 million people by the year 2020. And we did it with governments, with banks, with mobile phone companies around the world. And now the commitment is 1 billion people with 25 million women entrepreneurs and 50 million micro SMEs. And I'm telling you, they will do it. They will do it. And in the process, we got acknowledged by the IMF, the World Bank, the UN, people of impartial, I'm not blowing my own horn, but if you were to actually go and Google this topic, you will find we made a very substantial commitment. Now, the only way to do this was to not make it a checkbook, because the checkbook is limited by the $100 million I'm putting into the Center for Inclusion. That's just something else. This became part of the business because the logic was, if I take you out of the cash economy, you will become a client of mine in the future. Because today you will receive your benefit on a phone or a card. You will go and take out the money from the ATM and keep it in your pocket. But over time, you'll begin to spend on that card and you'll begin to use it. And once you start using it, Mastercard will benefit. And so it's in my own self-interest to empower you to enter the real economy. That's an example.
When we look at future of work, we think people will have, 3-4 careers, now. And what's the decision-making framework for these transitions from your perspective that has worked for you?
Well, first of all, by the way, I think young people, you guys have a great opportunity because the world now accepts the idea of you changing jobs and finding what works for you. When I was younger, you were supposed to be career lifers. People tended to stay a long time. I didn't. I was different. I changed from Nestle to Pepsi to Citibank to Mastercard, right? Over the course of 40 years. But a lot of people didn't do that. I think your generation will do this, and I think it's the right thing. It gives you many more experiences and makes you enjoy your journey, not just the end. The one thing I would tell you that I use as a filter for myself in hindsight, two things actually. One is I never overplanned my career. If you kind of plan too much, that, "Arey yaar, aaj main ye kar raha hu," and main 20 saal ke baad I want to be in that job, which means aaj se wahan I have to do this, then go here, then go here, like playing snakes and ladders. The problem is all the ladders will change their position in 20 years because the company will change completely. Forget about 20 years, it'll change in 5 years. So what you think is a job that looks really attractive 5 years from now may not exist 5 years from now. And the way to get there may not be the ladder you thought you would take here and the snake you would come down that side. It is actually something else altogether. And so I would encourage people, don't overplan. Don't be such a chessboard player. And instead, take life as it comes. Just let your hair down a little bit and take life as it comes. It allows you to enjoy the journey much more than the end in itself. And I'm not saying don't be ambitious. I'm not saying don't try and do the best you can and win. You have to win. You need a winning culture, not a soft culture.
Understood. And this one is back for the institute, Ajay. What is that one course or theme or topic that you think is not taught in the institution? Like this one's for back to the institution that you think should be added into the curriculum.
Humility. I think that because we all are lucky to get into institutions like IIM Bangalore and in my case IIM Ahmedabad, we go through a very competitive process. I don't know how many people nowadays apply to the IIMs, but it's tens of thousands. और वो करते कराते 200 आदमी अहमदाबाद जाते हैं, 200 बंदे जाते हैं. It's very, very few people, right? So we are self-selected into the cream of the crop. And that's a problem, because when you come out to work as a leader or as a person, I think the three biggest attributes that help you do well and become a good person are humility, humor, and a degree of kindness. And humility is the most underrated attribute of a person. How can you be curious if you're not humble? How are you going to learn from anybody and everybody if you're not humble? And I don't mean this is a course on humility. I mean the concept of humility should be taught to all of us bright guys and ladies who are lucky enough to get into the top institutions. We should be taught that there are other people like us, as smart, as good, as clever, maybe more so, whom you can learn from. And that humility will take you very far.
And one last question, and this one's very personal for me too, from a learning perspective. How does Ajay Banga be in the moment and mindful at all times? How do you manage that in all the clutter that is there when you're running a very large business?
I love people. And I get my energy from people. I don't get my energy from a spreadsheet or a P&L. I just don't. I get my energy from people. You can see when I'm talking to you, I'm enjoying the conversation, right? It's not that you sent me anything in advance, not that I know what you were going to ask me. I enjoy the conversation. I get my energy from the person. And so to me, mindfulness and curiosity are about enjoying the moment. If when I go out for dinner with my family, I don't take my phone. It's an old story. You can find it written. I don't take my phone. And my logic is that, kya karunga phone ke saath? What am I going to do? Look at it while my family is there? What's the point of sitting at dinner and all of us looking at our phone? Then we may as well sit in our separate rooms and conduct a Zoom conversation with the family while eating dinner. So I feel like mindfulness is what you do and how you conduct yourself. Live for the moment and live with the richness of enjoying the journey. I've said this so many times, right, in today's conversation. Enjoy the journey, not just the end. Because now I'm 62 and I'm nearer the end than I was 40 years ago, right? And it went by very quickly. So now what's the point if all I did was work, and never enjoyed the journey? You may as well enjoy the journey.
Thank you so much for this fascinating conversation, Ajay. I'm coming back to the entire, Googling, Imbue, and the Hindi version said "Prabhavit karna ya gehri soch ya vichar bhar dena."
Making an impact.
And it was certainly that for me, and I'm confident it'll be for everyone else. So really appreciate all of this, and I have a bunch of notes: decency, quotient, profit with purpose, competitive paranoia, and a few of my own sticky notes to stick on the wall. So really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much. It's been a privilege.
Thanks a lot, Ravi. Appreciate it. Thank you for having me.